If you have to buy one Mag 7 today, which one ultimately are you buying?
I mean, you're buying NVIDIA today?
Well, that's a question of what type of investor you are. There are investors that say, you know what, I'm looking for the most resilient name, because when this thing turns, that's going to be a leadership stock.
Right.
There's another mentality, which is what's getting hit the hardest? Where can I get the cheapest stock, or where is like the biggest bounce going to occur?
Gambler's mentality.
I'm in the first camp.
Right.
I'm not looking for the worst falling knife, hoping for a 20% bounce, which you might get.
And you've added to some long positions, including, I'm told, NVIDIA, which is ugly today and has not traded well at all lately. Why was this the moment to add to that stock?
True. The semiconductor index is down 20%. NVIDIA, as you know, is down from, I think, a peak this year at 150. So this stock's down by a third. Remember, we entered today in kind of bomb shelter positioning. We had puts on the NASDAQ. We had tremendous number of shorts. We're sitting in a lot of cash. We only had 50% of our long book even positioned in the market. So we're dramatically outperforming on a day like today. So we're going from the bomb shelter to simply our safety positioning. And that means adding about 15% of net exposure. And we're adding it in the areas that we believe we're continuing to see secular growth. And as you know, the growth and the demand for GPUs is off the charts. You hear it from OpenAI, you hear it from Google, you hear it from Elon, you hear it from others. I know there's a debate about that, but that's the side of the debate that we're on. And then although we saw these tariffs announced yesterday, we also saw a list of exceptions. And one of the list of exceptions, wise exception, is semiconductors. And I think the reason that semiconductors are being accepted is because for us to charge a tariff on our own chips, right, which are fabricated in Taiwan because they can't be fabricated in the United States, we don't have the fabs yet. TSMC, who he mentioned in his speech yesterday, has committed to massive investments as a result of the president's policy in Arizona to build cutting-edge fabs. But right now he gave them an exception because we know if we increase the cost of these chips that we design to our own companies like Meta, like Google, like Microsoft, like OpenAI, we're only shooting ourselves, right? Because we're in a global race in AI. We can't hamper our ability to win that race. And so I think that was a wise decision to put them on the exception list. I'm sure he's going to keep an eye on whether or not the fabs are being built in Arizona. But I think we're going to net end up in a much better place in terms of our global supply chain as a result of these decisions. But that's the reason we're buying NVIDIA today. We think the demand is off the charts. We think the negative impact from tariffs is going to be much less than in other areas. But listen, if we end up in the teeth of a recession, then even NVIDIA at 18 or 19 times earnings might not perform that well. Like, we need to avoid a recession in this country. I think it's very bad if we find ourselves in the fall in a recession, and we're heading into the midterm elections in 2026. I don't think the president, the administration, or Congress want to risk a recession, toward the end of this year.
NVIDIA, of course, down more than 30% from its all-time highs. That started even before tariffs really sort of entered the picture. I am curious as to whether you see, I guess, a reimagining of the AI chip trade that kind of really powered this market for the last couple of years. Is there maybe the potential that CapEx spend that all these companies have talked about, that will, if not stay intact, at least won't be reduced significantly?
Well, I can tell you this straight up. We do own NVIDIA. We would rather own NVIDIA over Apple if you compare the two directly. And I think part of the reason is the tariffs are much less likely to really impact NVIDIA. Number one, just because when you can't replace an NVIDIA B200 top-of-the-line AI accelerator with another chip, there are no alternatives. And so even if we do eventually see tariffs on semiconductors, which was one of the exemptions in this most recent announcement with tariffs, I still think the demand for these semis will be strong. And on top of that, and to your point, we've heard from several companies, OpenAI, XAI with Grok, Meta, Microsoft, they've all made comments more recently about how much demand they have. I mean, OpenAI and XAI have had issues because their servers haven't been able to handle the traffic. The demand is there for these chips, and I think that spend from those hyperscalers is pretty inelastic.
You know, Doug, we did get a story from Bloomberg talking about Microsoft pulling back on some data projects globally. Is this a big concern here, or is this they're just going to rent space rather than build space and we're all good?
You know, it feels like it's been one of these never-ending, he said, she said stories, because we've heard from a few different sell-side reports that Microsoft was planning on canceling some data center projects, and then we've heard from the company that their plans are intact. And I think the best thing we can kind of rely on is, what has the company said? They've talked about building about 100 data centers a year between now and 2030. And so if there's some small changes in maybe where they put the data centers, maybe they do a lease instead of a buy in terms of the CapEx, I'm sure there's small things happening there. But the big picture is the demand is there, and I think they're going to continue building to their plan.
And then there's NVIDIA. Okay, now listen to me for a second. Listen to me. It's down another 7% today. It's horrendous. I've been saying that, right? If I hit that from you? Why NVIDIA? Because the White House blessed its goods that are made in Taiwan with no tariff. Too important, yet few noticed. I know there's a widespread belief that we're seeing a slackening in demand for AI infrastructure. All I can tell you is that I monitor this thing like a hawk, and there hasn't been a slackening. It's been in total acceleration mode, but nobody cares. And I know it's headed lower. But at least you know why I'm not selling.
All right, I hope you're all doing well today and staying calm in this market. Today was a very rough day throughout the markets, with the S&P finishing the day around 4.8% lower and NVIDIA finishing the day about 7.8% lower. Today was a bloodbath in the market with very few stocks in the green. And most of the stocks that were in the green were in defensive sectors such as consumer staples and healthcare. In other words, market participants are not happy with the reciprocal tariff announcement, and they are bracing for trouble ahead. It remains to be seen what happens in the days ahead. The president said today that he is open to the possibility of negotiations, so we will see what happens. I really do think that the administration wants investors to feel uneasy in the short term so that they will invest in treasury bonds. That would help yields move lower, which would effectively allow the government to refinance some of its debt at a lower rate. And I also think the administration is trying to put pressure on the Fed to lower interest rates. If we look at a chart of the 10-year yield, we can see that it did indeed move sharply lower on the reciprocal tariff announcement. At the same time, if we zoom out, we can see that there is still a lot of room for it to move lower. That is somewhat unsettling to think about. Now I want to address a few things about NVIDIA. We have a negative macro situation, multiple negative headlines, and a looming threat of the AI diffusion rule in May. And so, in the short term, things are not looking great from a trading perspective. At the same time, I really do think the underlying thesis behind this company remains intact. I want to very quickly touch on multiple topics regarding NVIDIA. As for the story about Microsoft walking away from data center projects, I seriously question the truth of this report. TD Cowen published a similar note back in February, after which Microsoft came out and said that they're still spending $80 billion and that their plans have not changed. Then a month goes by, and we got what is essentially an identical report from TD Cowen, yet again claiming that Microsoft is walking away from data center projects. Given what happened last time, I seriously doubt the validity of this report, but I could of course be wrong. In reality, it appears we're seeing very strong demand for AI based on comments from companies like OpenAI, xAI Meta, and Google, who are all saying that their servers are running hot, and they are desperately in need of more GPUs to meet demand. And of course, NVIDIA is the go-to source for more compute. We also got news yesterday that Google is in talks to rent capacity from CoreWeave, which is yet another indicator that demand for AI is red hot right now. And so, if the companies that are putting up tens of billions of dollars each to build AI infrastructure are all seeing record level demand, then I think that is more likely to be the reality of the situation. As for NVIDIA, they are ramping production of Blackwell and expect margins to return to the mid-70s later this year once Blackwell has ramped. NVIDIA has a strong competitive moat across the entire stack that no other company is close to breaching. And companies that upgrade from Hopper to Blackwell equipped with NVIDIA Dynamo will see a 40x in revenue from their AI factories. And so, as long as NVIDIA is delivering performance increases that are this significant, I think the hyperscalers will continue purchasing large quantities of NVIDIA's latest products. In the short term, we have multiple headwinds to deal with, both regarding the macroeconomic situation and negative headlines about NVIDIA and AI data center build-out. But from a long-term perspective, I do think the thesis remains intact. Could NVIDIA trade lower? Absolutely. And I have no idea where the bottom is. At the same time, I do think this company will be worth more in the future than it is today, even if we have to deal with some turbulence in the stock first. Remember to stay calm in this market. Remember to maintain a long-term perspective and do not make any hasty or irrational decisions. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.